Here are the top stories for today, August 19, 2020. The Interagency Task Force orders the strict enforcement of localized lockdowns in areas under general community quarantine. The DPWH works on assessing the damage brought by the magnitude 6.5 earthquake in Masbate. Health Secretary Francisco Duque III denies that Philhealth lost 154 billion pesos to fraud. And the DOJ looks into investigating the killing of Negros-based activist Sara Alvarez. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases has ordered the strict implementation of localized lockdowns in areas under general community quarantine. All local governments are directed to observe the strict enforcement of localized community quarantine in identified component cities, municipalities, and villages with community transmission. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque also said that the local government units in Metro Manila will impose a unified curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Roque reiterated the rules in areas placed under GCQ. Let's watch this.
Ano ba ang pwedeng gawin at hindi pwedeng gawin sa ilalim ng GCQ? Ito po, narito po. Una, ang pwede lang pong lumabas ay mga essential workers at yung mga tinatawag na APOR or authorized persons outside of residence. Bawal pa rin po lumabas ang below 21 at ang mga seniors, yung may sakit at mga buntis. Pinapayagan na po ang pampublikong transportasyon basta meron pong social distancing.
Hindi pa po pwede ang gyms, no? Ang gyms po hindi pa talaga po pwede. Pero yung pagkain po sa dine-in, inaalaw naman po yan, no? Pero ang general rule naman po talaga, kung hindi naman magtatrabaho, wag na pong lumabas, no? Yun po talaga yung general rule natin. At saka yung rules of GCQ, malinaw na po yan, no?
Motorcycle barriers are no longer required for riders and backriders who are living in the same residence. The easing of restrictions on motorcycle pillion riding came after the Joint Task Force COVID Shield recommended the easing of restrictions among married and living in couples, family members, and even people who are not related but live in the same residence. National Task Force on COVID-19 chaired by Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana approved the recommendation. JTF COVID Shield Commander Police Lieutenant General Guillermo Rezar said riders and backriders should present proof that they indeed live in the same house to avoid being apprehended. Some restrictions for pillion includes that the backrider must also be included in the list of authorized persons outside residence at the motorcycles that would be used must not be for hire. The new rules on motorcycle backriding apply for all areas under the general community quarantine that include Metro Manila, Rizal, Cavite, Laguna, and Bulacan. More public transportation routes and public utility vehicles are now available in Metro Manila as the region shifts to general community quarantine. LTFRB Chairman Martin Delgra III said this would continue until there are enough routes running on the roads. The LTFRB says there will be 126 traditional PUJ routes in Metro Manila with 12,443 units. Meanwhile, buses will remain at 31 routes with 3,662 units, point-to-point buses at 33 routes with 363 units, and modern PUJs at 45 routes with 716 units. Taxis will also resume operations with 20,493 units, while Transport Network Vehicles, or TNVS, will have a total of 23,776 units. Delgra reminded commuters that face shields are now required in all forms of public transportation in the country, in addition to wearing face masks, physical distancing, and other health and safety protocols mandated by the government. He said PUV operators must also be ready to have their PUVs regularly disinfected and their drivers prepared for the new normal. Meanwhile, the National Federation of Public Transport Cooperatives and Liga ng mga Tsuper at operators ng Pilipinas appeal to their members to implement the health protocols set by the government, such as the regular disinfection of units and strictly enforcing physical distancing among passengers. The second phase of the government's National Action Plan against COVID-19 seeks to ensure smooth crisis response from the national down to the local level and does not interfere with the efforts of local government units. Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. emphasized the need for a harmonized response in response to Senator Risa Ontiveros' resolution seeking a Senate inquiry about President Rodrigo Duterte's designation of cabinet secretaries to every LGU where there is a high number of COVID-19 cases. Based on IATF Resolution number 62 issued last August 12, at least 27 cabinet officials are assigned in the 16 cities and 1 municipality in Metro Manila, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, and Rizal to provide stronger support to local government units with areas identified with high community transmission.
Sa implementasyon ng ating concept, hindi po pwedeng dapat makita po natin kung nag-harmonize ang local government officials at saka po yung national government. Kahit na maganda po yung ating plano, pero hindi po nakikita ang implementasyon sa baba, wala po mangyayari po sa ating plano. Bumababa po tayo sa mga different cities at saka mga provinces ay para tingnan po natin kung ano po yung nangyayari po doon at saka yung totoong datos. Maganda po kasi pagka once na yung ating concept at ating plano ay naibaba po at na-implement po hanggang sa barangay, ay doon po natin makikita yung tinatawag na magandang patutunguhan.
Meanwhile, members of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases said there is no intent to control the local government units amid the fight against COVID-19.
Mali po yung interpretasyon ni Senator Ontiveros. Wala pong intervention, wala pong paghihimasok ang ginagawa namin. Tinatanong lang po namin kung paano makakatulong ang pangnasyonal na gobyerno sa mga lokal na pamahalaan.
More indigent senior citizens have already received their cash incentives from the Department of Social Welfare and Development. DSWD Secretary Rolando Bautista said that while the agency is busy with the implementation of the Social Amelioration Program, other existing projects are still being carried out. The DSWD said it has provided some 8.4 billion pesos worth of cash incentives to 2.8 million indigent senior citizens in the country. The agency started with the first semester of payouts for its social pension program mid-April this year. Under this program, indigent senior citizens enjoy a monthly stipend of 500 pesos to augment their daily subsistence and other medical needs. It is distributed on a semestral basis at 3,000 pesos per semester or 500 pesos per month for 6 months. Qualified to receive social pension are seniors who are frail, sickly, or with disability, without any pension from other government agencies and without a permanent source of income. Meanwhile, the local government units were given a notice to submit their list of pending SAP recipients today for validation. DSWD Secretary Rolando Joselito Bautista said the agency returned more than 200,000 social amelioration card forms to LGUs nationwide due to incomplete information. Bautista also apologized to the public as the agency did not meet its targeted date of August 15 to complete the distribution of cash aid to 14.1 million family beneficiaries of the second tranche of SAP. He said there was difficulty reaching geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas and restriction on mobility after a significant number of their personnel have tested positive for COVID-19, while others were forced to self-quarantine. President Duterte wants to visit residents affected by the 6.6 earthquake which rocked Masbate province on Tuesday morning. However, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said that even if Duterte is more than willing to fly to Masbate, it remains to be seen whether his close insecurity would allow him to push through with his trip. Duterte is known to visit victims of calamities prior to the pandemic.
Siguradong sigurado po ako na gusto ni Presidente pumunta. At siguro po, makikipag-away pa yan sa PSG kung talagang siya ipipigilan. Instinctively, ang Presidente gusto nang lumipad papunta ng Masbate. Pero whether or not he will be allowed, tignan po natin.
Meanwhile, the Department of Public Works and Highways is already assessing the damage caused by the quake in Masbate. More on this from Chris Mundo.
The Department of Public Works and Highways is conducting an assessment of infrastructures in areas affected by the magnitude 6.6 earthquake in Masbate. DPWH Secretary Mark Villar said they have already deployed teams to assess structural integrity and damages of key infrastructure. The teams will also assess the damage of the tremors to buildings, roads, and bridges in affected areas. Villar is urging the public to report to them through their hotline number any information on the damage or inspection requests in connection with the earthquake. Meanwhile, the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines says the Masbate Airport sustained no damage and it was not affected by the quake and remains operational. The CATAINGAN port, which is also in Masbate, also resumed operations, with no injuries or accidents reported inside the compound and its surrounding waters. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Mundo.
Still to come, Health Secretary Francisco Duque III denies that Philhealth lost 154 billion pesos to fraud. Malacanang vows to make the COVID-19 vaccine free for 20 million indigent Filipinos. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues. Health Secretary Francisco Duque III maintains that the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, or Philhealth, did not incur a 154 billion peso loss over the years due to fraud. Duque presented to the committee a letter from COA Chair Michael Aguinaldo dated June 10, 2020, confirming the absence of such findings in the published Commission on Annual Audit Reports. On the issues about Philhealth's 2020 information technology, Duque said there has been no release of funding for the project since everything is still at the proposal stage. To put Philhealth back on track, Duque recommended a complete overhaul of its information systems strategic plan. He also confirmed that the Philhealth management received an internal audit group report that showed the discrepancies in the budget proposal that earlier have been reconciled. He said he will direct the management to present this soonest so Philhealth can move forward in its much-needed operations. Meanwhile, Anak Kalusugan Party List Representative Michael Defensor invited the officials of around 45 hospitals involved in fraudulent schemes and transactions with Philhealth to testify before the panels. Based on the list of hospitals, those with the highest fraud-related cases include the Baguio General Hospital, Butuan Doctors Hospital and College, Fabiola Gabriel Center, Notre Dame de Charles Hospital, Tamparan Medical Foundation, Leona Lim Memorial Hospital, and Benguet General Hospital, among others. In Cebu City, local government units are urged to require all establishments to designate health, infection, and prevention control officers. Assistant Secretary John G. Gonzalez of the Office of Presidential Assistant for the Visayas said the measure is to ensure that establishments that are reopening will comply with the minimum health standards set by the Department of Health, or DOH. Health, infection, and prevention control officers are tasked to oversee the compliance of health infection protocols in an establishment or workplace. They are also in charge of submitting business monitoring reports, health contingency plan, observance of proper hygiene, decontamination, and contact tracing. Business establishments that will not comply with these pre-operation requirements may be issued show cause orders and may face suspension or revocation of business permit. The national government is reminding Filipino healthcare workers of a temporary deployment ban in the wake of the public health emergency. The IATF-EID temporarily suspends the deployment of medical professionals as it urges the Department of Health and government hospitals to hire more healthcare workers. This is to augment the workforce as cases soar to over 160,000.
Na pong suspendido ng POEA ang deployment. No? Hindi po sila nagpa-process ng mga bagong permits, no, to work abroad. Mas nangangailangan po tayo ngayon ng ating mga health professionals dahil nga 2 weeks ago humingi ng time out yung ating mga frontliners.
Malacanang on Tuesday assured that 20 million poorest of the poor Filipinos will still receive free COVID-19 vaccine, even if the national government will have to purchase doses for a steep price. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque made this remark after President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday night revealed that Russia and China will not be giving their vaccines away for free. Citing Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez III, Roque said the government can allocate 20 billion pesos to buy the vaccine with the help of the Philippine International Trading Corporation, Land Bank, and the Development Bank of the Philippines. He said the government will purchase 40 million vaccine doses or 2 doses per treatment for 20 million people, which is estimated to cost about $10 per dosage. On Monday, Duterte said he will seek a discount from China and Russia on the COVID-19 vaccines that each of the two countries have developed. Duterte expressed hope that the two leaders would understand his plight amid the global recession. A bill that would enable the telemedicine and electronic health industry to expand in the country and provide more services to underserved communities has been filed at the House of Representatives. Albay Representative Joey Salceda filed House Bill number 7422, or the Philippine EHEALTH and Telemedicine Deployment Act of 2020, which would promote the delivery of health and medical services using information and communication technology. Salceda said remote medicine services are essential, especially amid the COVID-19 pandemic. He noted that the proposed telehealth system would reduce fraudulent schemes which have been hounding insurers such as Philhealth. Salceda also highlighted the glaring geographical disparities in the distribution of basic medical facilities in the National Capital Region as compared to Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. The bill seeks to establish the components of electronic health systems, regulate the necessary health and supporting infrastructure, and develop a framework for strategy and investment in the health sector. The World Health Organization has lauded the Philippines' efforts to improve its healthcare capacity and curb the spread of COVID-19. WHO Western Pacific Regional Director Takeshi Kasale lauded the improvements made by the Philippine government to upgrade health services. Kasai noted that the government is continuously improving its testing capacity and contact tracing to protect the poor who need to return to work. Kasai said it's very important for everybody to voluntarily help suppress the rise of infections and not overwhelm the healthcare facility in this country. He also said governments should redouble their efforts to protect the vulnerable, noting a resurgence of the disease. Authorities have constantly reminded the public of the minimum health protocols, such as wearing face masks, washing hands, and observing physical distancing to curb the spread of the disease. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources has expressed support for a program that lets people exchange plastic waste from Manila Bay for cash. Here is our report.
The DENR on Tuesday threw its full support behind the Aling Tindera program, which incentivizes the collection of used plastic sachets that are ending up in Manila Bay. Aling Tindera is a joint project of the DENR National Capital Region Office and the Plastic Credit Exchange, a non-profit plastic offset organization. It seeks to incentivize fishermen and their families to collect plastic waste around Manila Bay and sell them in exchange for cash at Aling Tindera collection points stationed in coastal areas. The DENR described the Aling Tindera program as an innovative approach to address the problem of plastic waste in Metro Manila. Meanwhile, the PNP on Tuesday warned those behind viral photos on social media alleging that PNP Chief General Archie Gamboa hosted a party in Baguio City that they can be held liable for spreading fake news. PNP spokesperson Bernard Banac said the photos were taken at a private event in February this year, a month before the community quarantine measures in mid-March. He also called on the public to refrain from sharing such photos. On Monday, Gamboa reiterated that there was neither a party nor a testimonial parade and review held in his honor at the Philippine Military Academy in Fort del Pilar, Baguio City. In other news, LOTTO operations are now allowed to resume in areas under GCQ and modified GCQ starting Wednesday. In a public advisory, the PCSO announced the resumption of the selling of LOTTO tickets, online keno, and instant sweepstakes. However, small town lottery games are still suspended. The PCSO also reiterated that the Lotto ticket prices have been rolled back to 20 pesos. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Rom Dulfo.
In our business news, the main stocks gauge recovered on Tuesday, while the peso further strengthened against the greenback after the easing of the community quarantine level in the National Capital Region and 4 nearby provinces. After a 2-day slide, the Philippine Stock Exchange Index rose by 1.44% or 87.67 points to 6,156.45 points. All other counters tracked the main gauge, with all shares up by 1.15% or 41.44 points. Volume totaled 9.76 billion shares, amounting to 5.96 billion pesos. Gainers led losers at 117 to 71, while 43 shares were unchanged. The optimism in the local stock market also benefited the peso, which closed at the day's trade at 48.62 from Monday's 48.71. Up next, the DOJ looks into investigating the killing of Negros-based activist Sara Alvarez. And IP leaders in Surigao del Sur decry a documentary that allegedly misrepresents indigenous peoples' tribes. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders. The Department of Justice, or DOJ, may investigate the death of human rights activist Sara Alvarez as an extrajudicial killing. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara said they may consider her case for special investigation under Administrative Order 35. A body created under AO 35 is tasked to look into extra-legal killings, enforced disappearance, torture, and other grave violations of the right to life, liberty, and security of persons. Alvarez, a paralegal for human rights group Karapatan, was gunned down in Barangay Mandalagan in Bacolod City on Monday night. She was arrested in 2012 on charges of robbery and murder. Last March 4, she was acquitted along with 8 others in the death of Army Lieutenant Archie Lorenzo during an encounter between government troops and the New People's Army in Cadiz City, Negros Occidental in 2010. Indigenous peoples leaders in Surigao del Sur complained against a TV documentary which allegedly misrepresented their communities and played into the propaganda of communist terrorists. More on this from Marita Mawahe.
Surigao del Sur's indigenous peoples leaders decried on Tuesday, May 7's documentary entitled Ang Iskul Kong Bakwit, saying it allegedly presented a one-sided story that disrespected the rights of the Manobo tribe. Dato Rico Maca, the indigenous people mandatory representative of San Miguel, scored the documentary, aired last August 14, for failing to grasp the real situation and the problems of IP communities in Mindanao. Jawudun Jumar Bocales, the indigenous people mandatory representative of Lianga, pointed out that the documentary did not portray the atrocities of the NPA. Dato Constancio Duhac, the Manobo trial chieftain of Lianga, also censured the documentary, saying that it discredits government interventions in IP communities. In Agusan del Norte, the Army's 29th Infantry Battalion welcomed the 47 Manobo and Mamanwa tribe members who recently graduated from their CAFGU training. The 47 indigenous peoples graduated from months of rough military training together with 13 Visayans last August 14 in Sibagat, Agusan del Sur. 5 are tribal chieftains who offered themselves to become regular CAFGU members to serve the IP communities in their areas. The 5 claimed responsibility not just to maintain peace but also to protect their tribes against the Communist New People's Army terrorists. For his part, Southern Luzon Command Chief Antonio Parlade Jr. said military operations against communist terrorists and their allies in his area of jurisdiction will continue until all of them are forced to surrender. Parlade said the military will not allow the NPA Southern Tagalog Regional Party Committee to set up headquarters in Mindoro and reintegrate into society unless they surrender. Meantime, the Provincial Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict of Occidental Mindoro brought services to the isolated indigenous peoples of Monte Claro, San Jose. He said the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflicts shall stay with IP communities to properly listen to their concerns. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
In our foreign news, China on Monday slammed the recent U.S. executive order requiring ByteDance to divest its interest in TikTok's operations in the United States within 90 days. Beijing said that the so-called threats in national freedom and security brought by TikTok are merely excuses for the digital gunboat policy pursued by some U.S. politicians. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian claims some U.S. politicians are fabricating allegations in order to strangle TikTok. He noted that reports by the Central Intelligence Agency suggest there is no evidence showing China has intercepted TikTok's data or used the app to intrude into users' mobile phones. He added that relevant U.S. think tanks also suggest that banning certain apps just because they belong to a Chinese company is definitely not based on security grounds. He accused the U.S. of bullying behavior and sabotaging other countries' interests. In sports, the Philippine Basketball Association teams can finally take their swab test to be cleared for practice now that Metro Manila is once again placed under general community quarantine. The teams are scheduled to undergo swab testing for COVID-19 on Thursday and Friday. The three teams owned by the San Miguel Corporation will do their swab testing at the company's headquarters in Mandaluyong, while the other 9 clubs will have theirs at the Makati Medical Center. PBA Commissioner Willie Marshall said now that practices are set to resume, he hopes that Metro Manila's status would be relaxed further to a modified GCQ so that the PBA could resume its season. He expects that the league can push through by October if the teams have already done their scrimmages and if the NCR would be placed under MGCQ. The European Union is staging the first ever Teatro Europa in the Philippines, a virtual festival of theater arts featuring 7 classic pieces from Austria, the Czech Republic, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, and Spain. The event, which will run from August to September 2020, features performances of theater groups from various universities in the country. Full performances will be streamed on Teatro Europa's Facebook page every Friday to Sunday next month. Alongside the plays, Teatro Europa will also conduct its educational component where several university theater directors will engage in dialogues with audiences. Chargé d'Affaires Thomas Wirsing is optimistic the event could further promote European culture to the Filipino people even amid the global health crisis. Let's take another look at today's biggest stories. The Interagency Task Force orders the strict enforcement of localized lockdowns in areas under general community quarantine. The DPWH works on assessing the damage brought by the magnitude 6.5 earthquake in Masbate. Health Secretary Francisco Duque III denies that Philhealth lost 154 billion pesos to fraud. And the DOJ looks into investigating the killing of Negros-based activist Sara Alvarez. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head on to the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, I am William Theo. Good day and stay safe, everyone.